Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. 2024 is already off to a very busy start. I want to begin by addressing the shocking actions and lack of transparency from the Department of Defense. It is absolutely unacceptable that the Pentagon waited multiple days to notify the President of the United States, the National Security Council, and the American people that Defense Secretary Austin was hospitalized and unable to perform his duties. I represent Fort Drum, home of the most deployed division in the U.S. Army since 9/11. There are currently thousands of 10th Mountain Division soldiers deployed in the Middle East. And while those brave service members were under attack by Iranian-backed terrorists, the Secretary of Defense was in the ICU, the Deputy Secretary of Defense was on vacation, and Joe Biden and the White House were completely unaware. In the chain of command, the Secretary of Defense serves as the connection through which the President commands and controls our armed forces. There will be a congressional investigation already launched by HASC Chairman Mike Rogers into this dangerous dereliction of duty, and there must be full accountability, beginning, I believe, with the immediate resignation of Secretary Austin and anyone who lied for him. I now want to turn our attention to Joe Biden's border crisis, which continues to be the #1 concern, certainly of constituents in my district, and one of the top concerns of Americans across the country. Last week, over 60 House Republicans went to Texas, led by the Speaker of the House, to see firsthand the catastrophe that Joe Biden's open border policies have created. And it's not just in Texas. In upstate New York, where my district shares a border with Canada, overworked Border Patrol agents are being overwhelmed there by a flux of illegal immigrants from 79 different countries, just recently apprehending an Iranian national with clear terrorist ties. Since Joe Biden stepped into the Oval Office, there have been over 8 million illegal crossings. Last month, more than 300,000 illegal immigrants poured into our country, setting the record for the most monthly encounters in history. As President Ronald Reagan historically said, quote, "A nation that cannot control its borders is not a nation," end quote. Every day that Joe Biden and Secretary Mayorkas refuse to secure our borders, they fail the American people, sacrificing our nation's safety, security, and sovereignty. And while Joe Biden and Democrats refuse to act, House Republicans have taken action, passing the strongest border security bill in American history, H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, and we voted for significant year-over-year funding increases for our courageous Border Patrol and ICE agents. As we speak, House Republicans on the Homeland Committee are beginning the impeachment process of Secretary Mayorkas for refusing to do his job and refusing to uphold the law. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Flood from Nebraska, one of our members who joined Speaker Johnson last week at Eagle Pass as part of the largest congressional delegation to the southern border in history. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman, and I want to thank Speaker Johnson for bringing 64 of us to Eagle Pass, Texas. What I heard from the border chief at Eagle Pass was disgusting. From December 20th to December 30th, 8,000 to 10,000 illegal immigrants crossed into our nation. But what really bothered me was, and we have to understand this as Americans, when that kind of influx comes into the United States, it requires all 186 border agents that are on shift at that shift to come off patrolling the border and come into the processing center to process 8,000 to 10,000 people into the United States each day. 85% of those are released into the United States at 72 hours. I think when Americans go to bed at night, they expect Border Patrol agents to be engaged in law enforcement activities by patrolling the border. For 10 days, sans for except maybe a 4-mile area around Eagle Pass, 252 miles of the U.S.-Mexican border, just that part, was unguarded for 10 days. What does that mean? That means drugs, fentanyl, human trafficking, the organized cartels that are making $32 million a week just at the Eagle Pass area. That's when they are harming America by diverting all sorts of nefarious drugs and guns into the United States, which turns every city in America into a border town. It turns every city in Nebraska into a border town. Secretary Mayorkas has a lot to answer for. I look forward to everything that the Speaker and the leadership have put forward as a rank and file member. I couldn't be more proud to be on this team. And with that, I am honored to introduce our Majority Whip, Mr. Tom Emmer of Minnesota.
Thank you, Mike. A new year does not mean a clean slate for the Biden administration. From Joe Biden's disturbing pattern of corruption to the inexcusable chaos that my colleague Mike was just describing on our border, House Republicans are working to get the American people the answers they deserve. Today, the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees will consider a resolution to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress for defying lawful subpoenas. I applaud Chairman Comer and Chairman Jordan's leadership in introducing this resolution and reminding Hunter Biden that Congress is not just a backdrop for his press stunts. Ignoring congressional subpoenas is a violation of federal law. It's that simple. Hunter Biden believes his last name shields him from accountability. He believes he is entitled to a different set of laws as the president's son. We will remind him that he is not above the law. Meanwhile, the Homeland Security Committee will initiate impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas for flagrantly ignoring our immigration laws. Chairman Green has carried out a nearly year-long investigation, and one thing has been made very clear. Secretary Mayorkas has refused to enforce the laws of Congress and fulfill his oath of office. On Secretary Mayorkas' watch, nearly 10 million illegal immigrants have crossed into the U.S. when you include known gotaways. The DHS is releasing more than 1 million illegal immigrants into our country per year. And cartels are trafficking children and smuggling deadly fentanyl into our communities. What is Secretary Mayorkas' response? To tell the American people not to believe their lying eyes, refusing to acknowledge that what's happening at the border is a full-fledged, untenable crisis. The American people won't stand for it, and neither will House Republicans. Our majority was given a mandate to provide transparency and accountability, and we're going to uphold our end of that bargain today. If Democrats plan to argue in support of Hunter's blatant disregard for the law and Secretary Mayorkas' decisions that have put countless Americans in harm's way, I look forward to hearing their rationale. With that, I turn it over to our Speaker, Mike Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope it's going well for you so far. We had a busy holiday, and many of our committees worked earnestly through the 3-week time away when people were working in the districts. Committees were still hard at work. Oversight among them, Judiciary, Ways and Means on these issues that we're talking about today. Let me reiterate just a couple of points real quickly, and then we'll take questions. It was mentioned that we took what was the largest congressional delegation ever to the southern border a week ago. 64 members attended. There was 26 states represented, 1 U.S. territory. And that was not just symbolism. It's because every state, as has been mentioned here, is a border state. Everyone in the country understands this is an unmitigated catastrophe. It's a humanitarian catastrophe, it's a national security catastrophe, and it must be addressed. America's at a breaking point. We know that you've heard some of the numbers mentioned today, but there's 300 suspects on the known terrorist watch list that we know that are in the country. You hear the number about the gotaways, 7.1 million encounters at the border since Joe Biden took office. We estimate the number of people actually in the country is probably close to 14 to 15 million. I mean, just think about that. It's a staggering number. In December alone, we had the largest number total of persons crossing the border in our history. It's unsustainable. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people a month. We can't do this. When we went down to Eagle Pass, we saw some alarming things, and I summarized it the best way I could. It was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Heartbreaking because we saw the human tragedy that this is. They walked us into the processing centers and looked into the eyes of children, unaccompanied minors who were just there. You know, the Biden administration has lost track of over 85,000 of these unaccompanied minors that have come into the country. They've been distributed throughout the country by way of NGOs or some other means, and they've just lost them. We were asking Border Patrol agents there in the processing center, they go through a form of identification process for people who come across illegally. They do fingerprints and facial recognition and biometric data. They try to collect as much as they can, but they mentioned in a side comment they don't do that for children under the age of 14. Well, why? Well, there's some law that prevents it. Well, what do you do for those children? Well, as much as we can. What if they don't speak English? What if they can't communicate? What if they're really, really young? Well, sometimes we don't know what their names are. We just put a little label on them that says Jane Doe or John Doe. You're kidding me. What happens next? Well, then, we don't know. We're just the Border Patrol. I mean, our job is just to process people. The NGOs bust them away. You know where these children are making their way into is trafficking, right? I mean, it's just, we're looking through the plexiglass at these children who are looking it up with us with these big, sad eyes. Only God knows what they've been through on the journey into our country. It's just unbelievable that this is being allowed to happen. And these are policy choices that got us here. The White House has made a decision deliberately to do this. Joe Biden, from his first day in office, issued executive orders to begin to open the border. We produced a report following our trip. There were 64 members of the House Republicans who were on that border, and we documented 64 times, ironically, that the Biden administration intentionally undermined border security with executive orders, agency decisions, and the rest. This is a staggering thing that the American people need to see and understand, and we're going to make that available to everybody. We learned that the drug cartels in Mexico, as Congressman Flood mentioned, are making $32 million a week trafficking people into the country. Do the math. It's like $1.6 billion a year. This is just the Del Rio sector at Eagle Pass. This is happening all across the border. Think of that. These are transnational, dangerous criminal organizations that are doing untold harm to people, innocent children, teenage girls, people who are innocent in all of this. And the Biden administration is empowering that. Mexico is effectively a narco state, and they seem to be unaffected by it. So we are demanding that the president take executive order. Congress is working on statutory fixes to this. We passed H.R. 2, as was mentioned, 8 months ago. It's been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk. H.R. 2, Secure the Border Act, would reinstitute Remain in Mexico. It would end the catch and release madness that's going on. It would reform asylum, reform the parole, broken processes, and build a wall. If we don't have the functional equivalent of those components, we're not going to solve the problem. This is common sense. It should not be a partisan issue. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about what's right for the country. And we're demanding that the White House take action now. They told us on the border on our visit, Border Patrol agents, senior Border Patrol agents, they said, listen, we feel as though we're administering an open fire hydrant. This is a senior 33-year veteran of Border Patrol. Says, we're administering an open fire hydrant right now. People are talking about sending us more buckets. We don't need more buckets. We need to turn the flow off. I think that's an apt metaphor. If we don't do that, we're derelict in our duty. And so you're going to see the House Republicans continue to insist upon real transformational policy changes at the border. One more note on this point. The leading perpetrator of this crisis, of course, is the Homeland Security Secretary. Secretary Mayorkas his impeachment hearings are beginning today. We take no pleasure in this. There hasn't been a cabinet secretary impeached in since the late 1800s. But we live in unprecedented times. We've never had a cabinet secretary who openly flouted federal law, who refused to enforce the law, and then comes before Congress, raises his hand, takes the oath, and tells us things that he knows and everyone knows are obviously untrue. Insisting that the border is secure and that they've got operational control of that is just simply not true. And he says it over and over and over. This week, he admitted his agency is currently releasing over 85% of the illegals who come across that border. He knows exactly what's happening, and he is doing nothing to stop it. I'm grateful for the careful, methodical work Chairman Green has done over the past, really, it's been many months now, investigating the Secretary, doing our constitutional duty. It is the duty of Congress to hold the administrators in the executive branch accountable, and that is what they've done, very carefully, very methodically, not in any snap way, not in a political way. They've been looking at the facts. And because Secretary Mayorkas refuses to enforce the law, Congress is now going to have to take the next step to hold him accountable. And so we'll see how that plays out. I will take your questions on anything now. Back.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and Happy New Year. You don't like CRs, you've made that abundantly clear, but it seems increasingly clear that a CR will be needed to avert a shutdown before January 19th, the first deadline. Are you willing to shut down the government rather than put forward a CR in order for Congress to take up its appropriation bills and get them to the president's desk?
Listen, we have the appropriations process working on all cylinders right now. We came up with a top-line agreement. That was necessary, as you all know, so the appropriators in both chambers can get together and negotiate the final spending bills. We have been working very hard since the beginning of this Congress to get 12 separate appropriations bills done. We passed 7 of them off the House floor. We funded about 81% of government. I think 4 of the rest have been through at least some final stages of the process, if not a House floor vote. To date, I think the Senate has only done 3 bills. So now this puts everybody in a room to be able to negotiate what those final numbers are. It is working in earnest. I would say the pedal's to the metal right now, and I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we can meet the deadlines. As you know, January 19th is coming up, February 2nd. They're in 2 different tranches. We're not going to prejudge that, but I'm telling you that I know the staff is working overtime, as the members have been, as the leadership team has been, all throughout the holidays to get this done for the people. It was a tough negotiation. We got it done. I think it's the best possible deal that conservatives and Republicans could get under these circumstances. We were able to carve out some of the gimmicks of that last deal, the side deals that went along with the FRA number, the top line, $16 billion and some change that we converted gimmicks into real cuts for the American people, savings to taxpayers, cutting the bureaucracy. I think that's a win. And, you know, Wall Street Journal and other outlets have said as much. We're going to advance this. We're going to push it aggressively, and I'm very hopeful we can meet the deadlines. Yep, down here.
Well, you want to 100% rule out a CR right now?
I'm not ruling out anything, committing to anything other than getting these appropriations done. And I think we can. And we're pushing everybody hard. I mean, they're working overtime and dutifully and valiantly. And I'm very optimistic we can get it done. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Speaker, we just learned that Hunter Biden has showed up at the House Oversight Committee. Want to get your reaction to that? And does this change House Republicans' plans in any way to move forward with holding him in contempt of Congress?
I just heard, too, we have a Hunter sighting today. Oh, boy. He's back, I think, to complain about being compelled to testify. But he's still in defiance of the subpoena. And that is the important and undeniable fact here. He's defying a lawful congressional subpoena. So I support the Oversight and Judiciary Committee efforts to hold him in contempt. We have to do this. This is our role. It's our responsibility. We're not taking any pleasure in this. This is not political. We've been charged with that. Our committees are doing their job. You saw the Oversight Committee, Judiciary Committee, Ways and Means Committee, for a year now have been carefully, methodically investigating these incredible allegations against the Biden family. And we've had whistleblowers come forward from agencies, from the IRS and others who've come forward and said, there's a lot of smoke here, and it looks like there may be fire as well. And so the job of the Congress under the impeachment power that's given to the House, specifically and exclusively, is to investigate these things where there are credible allegations of this kind of activity and to follow the truth where it leads. You've heard me say it over and over. That's what they're doing. That's the next step. And when someone defies a subpoena of Congress, there must be accountability. And that's why they're doing it. I don't know why Hunter's here. He wants another photo op, but he is not, he's not complying with that subpoena. Yes, sir.
Last question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year. Some of members of your conference who oppose the spending deal you reached with the Senate have talked about a motion to vacate. Chip Roy talked about it yesterday publicly. Tim Burchett has said that he's still pondering it. What do you say in response to those members, and are you concerned that you could lose your job over this deal, as the last speaker did over the first CR?
No, look, I'm not concerned about that. We're leading. Chip Roy is one of my closest friends. We agree on almost everything in principle. What I've talked with him about is the reality of being in what is soon to be the smallest majority in the history of the Congress, except for one exception, I think, in 1917, according to my research. We have very difficult challenges, but we're going to advance the ball. We're going to advance our conservative principles, and we are going to demonstrate that we can govern well. And I'm going to keep trudging forward. Look, leadership is tough. You take a lot of criticism, but I am a hardline conservative. That's what they used to call me. I come from that camp. Chip and I agree on spending, that we've got to dramatically reduce it. And I have a long record as a legislator of trying to cut spending. And when I was chairman of RSC, we prepared budgets that would get us back to balance. So this is a very serious priority of mine. This, to me, this deal, this agreement, is a down payment on restoring us to fiscal sanity in this country. It's critically important. Remember, last week we crossed a dangerous threshold: $34 trillion in federal debt. $34 trillion. We borrow every 140 days, as Congressman Schweikert pointed out in our conference this morning. Every 140 days, we have to borrow $1 trillion. Just think about that. The scale of this is incredible. So we have to bend the spending curve. We have to cut more. and we're going to. And I think we demonstrate we govern well. We're going to grow the House majority, and for the Republican Party in this upcoming election, I believe Republicans are going to win the Senate and the White House. And we're going to turn this thing completely around, and I can't wait to do it. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.